Hello. On behalf of the Shawnee County K-State Research and Extension Office, welcome. We are so excited to kick off our Planting Wild webinar series with Shawnee County Master Gardener Jakica Tancabelic's presentation, Garden Design for Wildlife. Before I turn it over to Jackie, I'd like to ask that all participants turn off their microphones and video cameras for the duration of the presentation. If you have any questions at all, feel free to type them in the chat box where I can relay them to Jackie. Or once the presentation has concluded, we can all turn our mics and cameras back on and have a little discussion. We will be recording today's webinar. Later this week, it will be posted on our YouTube channel and on our website, and we will email a copy to our registered participants along with a very short survey. Please take the time for our 2-minute survey. It helps us continue to provide quality programming for our community. All right, well, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Shawnee County Master Gardener, Jakica Tancabelic. Jackie?
Thank you, Leslie. Hello, everyone. This is my first webinar, so as you see, I thought I knew something about computer, but obviously I know less than I thought. Nevertheless, today we're going to talk about garden design for wildlife. And before we start, I would like to mention a few things from Kansas State University. It is an affirmative action equal opportunity employer. All the materials and programs are open to all without regards to race, color of the skin, national origin, sex, gender, gender identity, religion, age, height, weight, disability, political beliefs, sexual orientation, marital status, family status, or veteran status. So let's start. Why garden for wildlife? The purposes are multiple. We want to restore the vanishing habitat. We want to support the pollinator. We also like to create a space that we share with wildlife and that we can interact with wildlife without conflict. And we also want to enjoy and learn about the wild creatures that share our world. 4 things all wildlife need to survive and flourish are water, food, shelter, and cover. Those 3 we all share, and wildlife-friendly gardening practices, and that is going to be the focus of our talk. Water is essential for wildlife. It uses it for drinking, for bathing, for breathing, and also for shelter. Water can be added in many different forms, from bird baths to dishes to tubs, fountains, ponds, water gardens, rain gardens, misters, drippers, butterfly puddle, bee puddles. The more water sources in your environment, the better. Wildlife also requires food. It will feed on plants and it will feed also on each other. The types of food include flower for nectar and pollen, other parts of the plant, foliage, seeds and nuts, berries, fruit, as well as other animals from bugs, worms, rodents, birds, and so on. We will start with butterfly and moths. Adult butterflies and moths are very important pollinators, and their main source of food is the flower nectar. So what we want to do is plant a variety of nectar plants that bloom throughout the growing season to ensure a steady food supply. So it is not only that we need the flowers in the springtime, which is basically this time of the year here in Kansas, where everything looks so lush and colorful and beautiful, May and June, and then the July and August heat strikes, and then everything just burns to a crisp. Basically, we need to keep the flowers, the blooms coming on in order to support butterflies and adult moths. This is a list of the common flowers that attract the butterflies as well as moths. Coneflower, which grows nicely here, butterfly bush, bee balm, dahlias, Mexican sunflowers, lilies, daylilies, pentas, lantanas as annuals. Daisies, milkweed, very important, asters, coreopsis, scapiosa, sedums that really grow nicely in Kansas, as well as zinnias. Most butterfly species have a very specific host plant for their caterpillar. The caterpillar will feed only on those specific plants. So we know that monarch caterpillars feed exclusively on milkweed plants. If there is no availability of the host plant that they like, they basically, the butterflies cannot complete the life cycle in any garden. The caterpillar host plants for other butterflies, such as the black swallowtails, are parsley, dill, and fennel. And there is quite a few of them that you can notice and see, especially if you have parsley and dill in your yard. And it's just amazing how they go to a whole nice big bushy parsley plant and dill plant. Now, this is maybe not in the purview of our talk, but the difference between fennel and dill, I think is really important for the cooks, although the caterpillars really don't care. Of course, they have a very different taste. Dill is herbaceous taste, and what we use is the seed and the leaves in cook. And fennel has a gentle licorice-like taste. And we use in fennel the seeds, the leaves, and the bulb, which makes wonderful salads. Okay, let's go back to our talk. So milkweed cultivars for monarch butterflies, there are different cultivars. The one that is quite common here in Kansas is the so-called butterfly milkweed, which is orange. There is also the white and pink swamp milkweed that you're going to find in ditches. There is the showy one, the pink one. I think that is represented on the photo, and then the common milkweed, also pink. Hummingbirds. There is 9 different types, species of hummingbirds that are recorded in Kansas. A main source of food is flower nectar as well as insects. That is why I really like them in my yard. Homeowner usually cannot provide insects, but it's quite simple to provide artificial nectar and flowers. Hummingbirds are attracted to red and orange colored petals, and they really like the deep-throated flowers where they can go in with their long, thin beaks. Honeysuckle, trumpet vine, cardinal flowers, bee balm, and sage salvia. Hummingbird feeders are very easy to fill. They're very easy to take apart and clean if it is a good quality feeder. The color of the feeder is quite important. Use one that is red or red and white. Yellow color on the feeder is going to attract bees and wasps. The solution usually consists of 1 part sugar in 4 part water. Boil the water or microwave it and dissolve the sugar, and then place the cooled solution in the feeder. The solution, because it's a sweet solution, it will attract ants. It needs to be really changed every 3 to 5 days, or sometimes maybe in a week, but when it becomes cloudy, it needs to be changed. In the springtime, it's not a bad idea to add an extra tablespoon of sugar, and check on the web if the hummingbirds are migrating in our area. I did put hummingbirdcentral.com, which I found at the Audubon Society website. It really gives you a very nice outline about as hummingbirds are moving throughout the United States, and especially reporting in the local area. To attract the spring migrant hummingbirds, place a feeder by mid-April. If no activity is noticed by this time, which is late May, beginning of June, take the feeder down and put it back again in August and September, because that is when the hummingbirds are going to be going back south. Now let's talk about feeding the birds in general. The type of birds that will come to your yard or that you want to attract is going to really depend on the type of feed that you're going to put out, the type of feeder that you use, and the location of the feeder and feed. It is very important to have plenty of water, especially in the winter. When feeding the birds, the height of where the feeder is positioned is really important. American goldfinch liked raised or hanging feeders, so higher up. Black-capped chickadees, sometimes are ground feeder, or they prefer low raised feeders or hanging feeders. Northern cardinal bird, they like low raised feeders. Mourning dove, you will always see them in the ground looking for seeds. A good question was asked regarding the height where you want to put the feeder. Basically, if you put it anywhere between 3 to 6 feet in that range, you're going to hit most of the birds. Although the mourning dove, they always stick to the ground. Except if you put peanuts on the feeder plate and hang it up, then they will go, then they will fly up. Okay, feeding the birds. This is a very interesting study that the United States Fish and Wildlife Service did a few years ago, when they were looking for birds' food preference at the feeder station. So they put all sorts of seeds in different feeders and then basically tallied which feeders are the most visited. The one that prevailed was the sunflower seed. It was superior to other foods for most of the bird species, followed by white proso millet, as well as peanut kernels for the birds that have the beak that can eat the peanuts. Milo, rapeseed, and flaxseed were completely ignored as long as there was sunflower seed or millet available. So when buying bird seed, it is really important to see the percentage of sunflower seed in a bag, because that is the one that is going to attract the most birds to the feeder. Shelter. Shelter for the birds is really important, but also for other wildlife. It does protect from the weather, it does protect from predator, and it's often a safe place to raise the young. Examples of shelter or cover are multiple. Trees and evergreen shrubs are really important for the birds that don't migrate. Rocks, a wall or a rock pile, a brush pile, if you have a urban smaller yard, then a brush pile is a little bit harder to maintain. Native grasses, meadow, pond or water garden, roosting, nesting box, and using ground cover instead of lawn. So we're going to switch a little bit gear and talk about wildlife-friendly gardening practices. And we're going to touch several topics I'm pretty sure a lot of you are familiar with. First, conserving soil and water. Good quality soil and the abundance of water are really important to have a thriving garden. Methods such as xeriscaping, choosing plants that endure the drought, mulching to conserve the moisture in the soil, using drip or soaker hose irrigation, using rain barrels or making a rain garden, and putting plants that reduce erosion and runoff are really important in conserving soil. The pesticide usage has to be really wise and really limited. Basically, use it when everything else fails. So, in other words, use alternative pest control methods whenever it's possible. And time the chemical use when it's least damaging to wildlife. We know that bees pollinate during the time. So in order to protect them from the effect of the pesticide, use it at night when they are in their high. Read the labels fully to understand some of the ramification of the use, basically some of the consequences of using a pesticide. A prime example, especially this season, is I see the truck going around with mosquito control in the yards. The problem is that whatever they're putting, it's not only controlling the mosquito, but it's killing everything around. So it's killing the beneficial insects, it's killing the mosquitoes, it's killing everything in that particular lot. Correctly identify the pests and diseases to avoid chemical misuse. That is the point. And organic chemicals and remedies, homemade remedies, can be just as bad for wildlife as any other product. And here I primarily think about bleach and about vinegar. Reduce or eliminate invasive or non-invasive or non-native plants from your yard or your garden. Invasive plants outcompete natives. That is why they're invasive and may become a significant problem to control. And for the pollinators, non-native plants are actually not as desirable as native plants. Therefore, the invasive plants that are very often non-native are of no use as far as preserving or helping the pollinators. One of the most common culprits that we have in our area is the so-called Asian brush honeysuckle, which is the Japanese honeysuckle or the Tatarian honeysuckle. They have those white flowers that smell nice, everybody likes, then they have the red bee that everybody likes, and the birds poop everywhere around, and they basically choke everything on their pathway. People have it all over the yards. I mean, I see fences in my neighborhood completely covered and choked with this honeysuckle. And of course, it's so tempting to bring something bad and just spray it them, but I cannot do it because it's other people's yard. But it is really not a good plant to have around. And the other picture basically showed an invasion of kudzu, which is not yet in Kansas. The last time I checked when I was doing this, preparing this talk, but it's pretty much, it is in Arkansas, and probably it's going to hit, or it's hitting Missouri now quite fast. So planning your wildlife-friendly landscape, what do you want to how do you approach it? First, look at what you have in your garden. What kind of bushes you have, trees, what perennials do you have, which one do you like to grow? And then decide what wildlife you want to attract. Do you want to focus on the pollinators? Do you want to focus on birds? Do you want both? And depending on that, decide what type of plants and landscape do you need. What is also extremely important is to create a different, diverse environment by using hedges, by using vertical structures, and also using different combinations of plants, annuals with perennials, and the transition plants between partial shade and the full shade. Landscaping for the butterfly, hummingbirds, and birds shouldn't be difficult, but what we see a lot is one feeder in the backyard and a bird bath in the front yard, and that's probably not going to attract the birds. The feeders and the bird bath needs to be a little bit closer to each other together with the structure that makes the bird feel safe, and plants that will attract the butterfly, hummingbirds and birds, as well as other wildlife, which is including our ever-present squirrels. So here are some ideas about how to do it. Add small branches at the bottom of the hedge, just places where small birds can hide. And at the hedge edge, leave the grass a little bit taller after mowing. Or plant native pollinators in front of a hedge. Or combine a small tree and bushes strategically placed at a different at a distance that is not too far away to help the birds hide and protect themselves or build a nest. So when thinking about landscaping for butterflies, hummingbirds, and birds, don't think only about the backyard. Think also what you can do with your front yard to attract wildlife. When you look through the windows in your house or apartment or home, what do you want to see in the front yard or in the backyard? What do you like to enjoy when you sit on your deck or front porch? And what is most important, how much time and effort do you want to put into creating a wildlife oasis? There is a way that you can do it so that you end up deadheading the whole day, flowers, or maintaining water feature. And then there is a way of doing by putting a lot of hardy perennials that don't need too much maintenance, and maintaining basically the bird feeders and the water features. So it really depends on the time that you have and the energy that you have, but even with not much time and not a significant amount of energy, one can make the part of their yard friendly for wildlife. This is just a list of common plants that are very attractive for the pollinators, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, and the birds, from annuals to perennials for the shrubs, especially viburnum, juniper, burning bush, boxwood. The boxwoods are great. They offer a good shelter in the winter. Then small trees, crab apple trees, Japanese maple trees, vines, trumpet vine, honeysuckle, but of course not the Asian type, the Tatarian or the Japanese variety. And then of course trees, maple trees, pine and oak trees. So now if you have any questions about the presentation or about gardening for wildlife, I'll be happy to attempt to answer them.
Hi, Jackie. This is Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
So my question is, what do you like to focus on when you're trying to attract wildlife to your home landscape?
So the way I devised it is because of where the windows of my house are placed. So in the front yard, I made a pollinator garden in the front yard because I noticed that people walking by like to look at the flowers. And when the butterflies are attacking the flowers, it's really a sight to be seen. And that creates a lot of good interaction with people. It's really also a social thing. That is the way I look at it. In the backyard, though, I put all my water features and my feeders. In the front yard, I have two very, very shallow dishes where I did a little puddle for the butterflies and other pollinators. So that is the way I did it.
What kind of water features do you have?
Oh, I have just a water bath, basically plain basins, but I
Oh, like
have them at
bird
different
bath?
height. I'm sorry?
Oh, like
Yeah,
bird
bird
bath.
bath. Yes, bird bath, and I have them at different heights. I have them very low and then also taller ones because I noticed that some birds really like, interesting enough, the smaller birds like to go to the lower position, the bird bath. And then, of course, our robins and blackbirds, they just love the taller position ones.
Uh-huh.
And I also keep them in a semi-shade so that the algae don't grow that fast, and change the water very frequently.
Right, right, yeah. Well, and I have a couple water features that I'm getting ready to replace the pump in them, but they are on a solar panel. So,
Ah,
once there's water in there, they just kind of take care of themselves. And they're just small, just a small little basin. So it doesn't take a lot of maintenance, It's just when the water gets low, I just fill it back up and it just runs and does its thing. Every now and then I got to scoop some leaves out of there. But it's great because the sound of and the motion of the water
mm.
actually helps to attract the birds. They
Oh
hear,
yes, I agree. I agree.
and so like on my bird baths too, I have like, a little dripper that I hang up over them. That oh, it's just like, well, the ones I have now are just a couple of, some bottles that I think I got like some fruit juice or something in, but they're big, like about a gallon size. And I cut a hole in the bottom and I hung them upside down and fill them with water. And then I can unscrew the cap to adjust how much water drips out of them at a time. And that dripping water helps attract birds to my bird baths, and it helps keep them full of water longer during the day, because you get like some of those birds when they like robins, I notice when they get in there, man, they just love to
Oh, they
splash
splash.
around. Right, they splash
They
all the water.
splash all over the place. Actually, I really took the effort of finding some deeper bird baths, not the shallower one. And that
Right.
was just because of the robins, because when they go in there, boy, it's wet all over.
I actually have a question from the chat box about bird baths. Becky Cunningham asks, do you have a bird bath especially for hummingbirds? If so, what is it like?
I don't. And I don't. Kevin, you might answer that question.
Well, hummingbirds actually get most of the moisture that they need from the nectar that they drink. But, most people don't realize that hummingbirds eat a lot of little bugs too.
Oh, that is why I want them. That is why I really work hard in attracting them. And what I found out, my main nectar for the hummingbirds, actually the plants that I see them going the most on, are bee balms and salvia. So I have a lot of salvia and a lot of bee balm in my backyard as well as in my front yard.
Right, yeah. Because I think those two, they have more, or maybe not more, but their nectar has a higher sugar content than a lot of other flowers. And like you were saying, with hummingbirds, they like those long-throated blooms because those are the flowers that they don't have to compete with other pollinators that can't get down to access that nectar
Mhm.
deep in those flowers. Yeah.
Bessie's in the chat box saying hummers seem to really like Mexican sunflowers.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
okay.
That Mexican sunflowers are a great plant to have too for butterflies, particularly monarchs love those Mexican sunflowers.
And I saw somebody made a comment about Japanese maples. I think okay. I mean, Japanese maples are nice little trees, and in the few that I have, I saw birds making very small nests. So I don't think, and they're beautiful. The Japanese maples are really just beautiful trees with the red leaves. And then there was a comment about putting a brick in the water bath so that they don't splash water all over. And then there was another comment I think I saw.
Yes. Do you save your seeds from salvia or bee balm to sprout? And if so, how?
Okay, bee balm is you put 2 plants and you're going to get a field full of bee balms the next year. It can be quite invasive. So with bee balm, look at the variety that you're buying. There's different cultivars of bee balm. Some of them just stay as a nice little bush and don't move from there, but some of them will just invade everything. So you have to be really careful, look at the label and choose carefully which cultivar you want. Or if you have a nice corner that is sunny and you don't care how much is going to invade, just put it there and it's going to fill it up. Okay, so that is about that. And as far as salvia, with salvia, I have perennial salvia. You can also buy the annual one. You can find them in our nursery, but I really invested in getting perennial sage. And that is what I have in my yard. A lot of perennial sage. And I think it's not expensive and it doesn't spread, but it's a nice size bush. And after it blooms, you cut the spent blooms, and then it throws another run of blooms. So it basically blooms the whole summer long, well into the fall.
Well, and Jackie, I see that Carolyn mentioned about putting out like for like orioles and other birds that like fruit type stuff. I mean, yes. I know some people like slice an orange in two and mount it on a little.
For the orioles, yeah.
And another thing that I found is really great is I put up a bluebird feeder last fall, and so I have my first family of bluebirds in my yard this year, and they love eating those mealworms. And I put a little mealworm feeder out there, and I mean, man, they just eat that stuff now, especially since they have a little brood of young bluebirds that haven't quite fledged yet. It's like that mom is just constantly getting those mealworms and feeding them to her babies. But I also notice that I see like other little birds that like, a lot of birds eat bugs. And so I see like, black-capped chickadee and Carolina wren, flying down there to get those mealworms as well.
That's great. And I see Brenda posted that she taught the bluebirds to eat from her hand, which is wow.
Oh yeah, and yeah, isn't that cool? But
that's really cool.
Like now that I've, because usually I go out in the morning and fill up that mealworm feeder, and the bluebirds, if they know that you fill it up at a certain time, they'll be sitting right there on the branch just waiting for you to put them out. They're like, come on, it's breakfast time, Kevin, let's go.
Well, actually, that is why I really like the robins, because you know, whenever you dig anything, boy, they don't have a problem absolutely to come there and pull out the worms. They're just not afraid of anything, the robins. You know, food always prevails, especially when they have young that they want to feed them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I live on 40 acres and I have
Oh.
creek and ponds, and my front yard is actually the bird sanctuary, bird and plant sanctuary, but I don't use any additional water. Should I be using additional water?
You have water right there, right?
Yeah, that's, I mean, I'm not lacking for birds.
Yeah, that is the thing. You're not lacking it, and the fact that you have a pond and a creek. I mean, that's fantastic. Except if you like to wash them bathe, which I have to tell you, I get a kick out of it. You know,
Wash the what?
Yeah, I get a kick watching them splash. I mean, they're so funny. They're really funny. You can put a bird bath just for that, but just to
Exactly.
them to have, I don't think you need to put any additional bird. Yeah.
And Jakica, this is Chris Moody, by the way.
Oh my God, Chris, I didn't recognize you.
Well, I got long hair now, and because of the quarantine, my gray is showing.
That is why I keep it gray. That is what I thought. You look familiar, but you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, good to see you.
Almost 2 years of retirement, so.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's fun, isn't it?
It's wonderful. We get to do this kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Chris. There
Good
are
to see
some
you.
other questions. Can you help me, Leslie?
Yes, Melissa says, we moved to our house last fall. We'd like to redo some of the landscaping, especially shrubs. What is the best way to identify some of these plants?
That's, you know, okay. The best way to identify them is we have a nice library at the extension. Take a book and literally look at the shrub and try to identify it with a picture. Or take a picture of your shrubs and send it to us, and we'll help you identify the shrubs that you have.
Right. Just submit it to the response line and let the master gardeners do the work for you.
Yeah.
I use an app called Picture This, and you take a picture of it and it identifies it for you.
Oh, wow.
And on 40 acres, I've identified a lot of things I have no idea what they were.
Well, and I think that app is pretty, I mean, people, I've never used it, but people I know that do say that, you know, most of the time it's pretty accurate in identifying the plant. I think especially if it's a plant that's in bloom.
I really like the iNaturalist app. Becky has another question. She's asking, what shrubs are good for feeding the birds?
What shrubs are good for feeding the birds? Viburnum will give nice seed heads for the birds that I saw them eating on them. Then what I also then I also found out that it's a smaller bush, but there are some types of sedum that really grow in a very bushy fashion, and some birds just love to pick on the leaves there. Then burning bush is another one that they like to hide and they like to eat the seeds. Then the infamous Asian honeysuckles, which they love those seeds, some of the birds, but they spread it around and it's not a good thing for our environment. So that is how I would, that's the limit of my knowledge.
Well,
Edelberry is a great one. Thank you,
Yeah.
Caroline. That's a wonderful one.
Jack,
And honestly, I have a lot of strawberries, and they're all eaten by birds. Blueberries, they will eat the birds, but I don't mind. I mean, they're there, and I put a little And I put the forest strawberries, the small tiny varieties. They love those. So so there is different ways that you can plant stuff that they like to eat.
Well, and Jackie, like you said, focusing on native plants is important when you're wanting to feed wildlife because they're going to have more nutritious food source for wildlife,
Yes.
right? Like, yeah.
One thing I forgot to mention when you talked about fruit, for the butterflies and the moths and the bees in the puddles that I do, I usually put a piece of rotten fruit, you know, or something that went bad, or a piece of apple that is moisture or brown, and mash it together with the mud and the water, and they go to that because it gives them the sugar, it gives them some minerals, it gives them protein. So that is also how you can increase their energy.
Who said serviceberry? Yeah.
Anything else? Oh, a serviceberry is a great one, yes. Serviceberries are nice, yeah.
Yeah. That's just a nice plant in general because it has multi-seasonal interest. You know.
Chokeberries. Mm-hmm. There's actually a very nice selection that you can put around, put in.
Yeah. Hey, if people are really interested and want to know what kind of plants to have in their landscape for feeding birds, they should check out my webinar next week, next Tuesday. I'll tell them all about
There you go. So Kevin's webinar is going to cover all of that, which is, I think, really important. And Kevin does a detailed job. I'm more a generalist.
Yeah, no, mine's just about gardening for birds, so there'll be a lot more detail on stuff like that. But no, Jackie, I really enjoyed your webinar. You covered a lot of really important stuff, and in a way to kind of, if especially someone that's kind of new to wanting to create a little wildlife oasis in their yard, it's enough to pique their interest, to get their brain percolating about what they want to do, in their own yard.
Thank you, Kevin. You're very kind. Appreciate it.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
Yes, it was wonderful. I think we have one more question from the chat box. What about beautyberry? Is that helpful for wildlife?
What is a beautyberry? I'm sorry.
Becky Cunningham is asking about beautyberry.
Yeah, and there's a native beautyberry that you can get, and it's a nice bush, and it gets these dark purple berries on it. It's a very showy plant, but it can be a good food source. Oh, I see Bessie is reminding us to think about all pollinators, which that's true. There's a lot of other, um, many more insects besides butterflies that are pollinators, and
Yes.
including different kinds of beetles and moths and flies. Oh, I've been seeing a lot of those little flower flies around here recently, and so there's just a myriad variety of insect pollinators, and and I mean other birds act as pollinators as they move around in the through the plants. They pick up pollen on their feet and stuff, and yeah, by the way, I was really glad that you mentioned trees in there when attract for pollinators, because a lot of people don't realize that like oak trees, for example, are a really important host plant for a lot of pollinators. and willows and cherry trees. And so, you know.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Really happy that you're here answering questions.
Well, you know, if you
I
ever,
was a little bit afraid. I mean, you're the master for that.
It's true. Kevin helps often on our response line, so be sure to
Yeah.
call in with any questions.
yeah,
Well, one of our demonstration gardens, our Xerscape garden, has a purple beautyberry, according to Ariel. So we should all check that out.
Okay, maybe we should go and check that one out. Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah. And I think that one is a non-native variety, but if you go look at it, it looks very similar to the native plant. And I see Jan said to be sure and choose the native
The native one.
beautyberry. But, you know, again, it's like those native plants are going to be a far better food source because, well, two things. Number one, that's our wildlife are going to recognize those plants because they're the ones that are already there in the landscape. But also, they're going to have a lot better food value for them because other plants, cultivars or varieties that are bred to sell in the nursery, they're bred for their showy appearance and not necessarily for the amount of nectar or the food value in their berries and so on.
You know that I'm a staunch naturalist, Kevin, and I would love to agree with you, but there are some studies out now there, but you know, there's some science lacking behind who has the most nutritious value. But to err on the side of caution,
Yeah.
yes, we should plant with the plants that have grown up with the critters for millennia. No?
Can't go wrong with natives, but no, you're right. And I think, well, and also I think over time that plant breeders are going to see the benefit of breeding plants that do have more nutritional value or are more attractive to pollinators because people more and more are, you know, a lot more gardeners have an interest in that area now. And so that's plant breeders, you know, they're breeding plants to their customers. Right.
Okay, so before I forget, on the slide presentation, there is a page for additional resources. There is the Shawnee County Extension Master Gardener response line. There is the suggested pollinator publication, the K-State Extension Wildlife Management website page, the National Wildlife Federation, the Xerces Society, which Bessie mentioned as a good resource, and Monarch Watch.
Jackie, why don't you go ahead and share those screens for you with the participants one more time before we go? Can you share again? Can you go down to the bottom? And
this one?
it's the green, it should be like a box with an arrow that says share.
Share screen.
Okay, let me find the box that says share. Okay, share screen. Okay, sorry about that. And share. Yeah, here we go. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware that, you know, what I see on my laptop is not what other people see. So, yeah.
So those are great resources. Well, if there aren't any more questions, Jackie, thank you so much. That was great. And thank you all to our participants today. Please join us next week at this time where Shawnee County Master Gardener Kevin Seek will give his presentation This garden's for the birds. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
Jackie.
Don't
Thank you
forget to
all.
fill out your
Bye.
super
Bye,
quick
Chris. Good to
survey.
see you again.